Today we're playing Pokemon Prism, one of the best Pokemon ROM hacks that ever hit the Game Boy Color. The reason why it's so popular, however, is because it has so many awesome features. Like an entire new region called Naljo that has never been discovered before, that ties into a very unique story about you, the son of the Pokemon champion, who steps into his Pokemon journey on a very unexpected way. But can we follow in our father's footsteps and become champion of Pokemon Prism? Well, the answer is probably yes, so I wanted to make it harder on myself. Hence why I'll be playing through it with Pokemon that only have a 4x weakness. So for example, if we're up against a Water-type gym leader, our Geodudes and Onixes are going to have a rough day. There's so many more features in Pokemon Prism that we haven't talked about yet, but we'll be uncovering it all today, so take my hand and join me into our adventure of Pokemon Prism. So at this point, I think we've all established that I'm a gamer. Definitely not the best gamer, but that's where today's sponsor, Red Magic, is going to help me out. You guys know that I love Red Magic around here, but they have just brought out a new Red Magic Asterisk gaming tablet, and they sent me one so I can show you guys what it's all about. It's going to be released on July 1st and will be one of the strongest gaming tablets that ever hit the market. It's powered by the Snapdragon 8 Elite, one of the top-tier mobile processors from Android. Of course, it's also significantly bigger than their regular phones. And with their high-resolution OLED screen, focusing on their gameplay has never felt easier. To make your gaming experience even better, it also has its very own game center that you can open up with just a switch of a button. You can then allocate your CPU and GPU for the best performance, and if it's battery life you're after, you can just go ahead and lower down the quality. It even has a ton of plugins that you can use in any kind of game, but if you're specifically playing multiplayer games, this can actually give you an edge over the competition. Like for example, their more precise movement wheel. All of these can also be changed around while you're in the game yourself, so you don't have to close it out to change it all up. And speaking of customization, there is a ton of options there as well, as you're able to change the color and shape of all your icons to match with the wallpaper you decide to choose, whether it's one of their custom ones or a photo you took yourself. But by far the coolest thing is being able to customize the LED lights that come out of the tablet itself, so you have that real gaming PC energy right in your hands. So if you're interested in upping your gamer game for yourself, you can click the links in the description to check out the Red Magic Asterisk gaming tablet for yourself. A huge thank you to Red Magic for sponsoring today's video, and let's get right back into it. At first sight, I think our character is crazy, because we don't get greeted by a professor, but by a voice in our head. It explains the world of Pokemon to us and the adventures of the legendary trainers Red and Gold. They both managed to become champions and took down the evil Team Rocket, but this voice seems to know that I'm also destined for greatness, and a great trainer needs to have a super cool design. Hence why you're able to choose between 6 different models. I personally decided to go with this guy with a bandana on because there's never been a champion that has a bandana, so that'll immediately make me stand out. And it also shows everyone not to mess with me. From there on out, you can also customize the colors, but since my favorite color is blue, I decided to stick with that. From there on out, we shrink down like Ant-Man and start our Pokemon journey. It starts off in a very wholesome way with me and my mother camping out in the wilderness. She's super glad that we're spending this time together because our father has just moved on to the champion position, which means we won't be seeing him a lot anymore. She knows we want to follow in his footsteps, but makes me promise one thing: if we go on our own journey, we can never forget about our mom. A very valid thing to say, because I don't think Red or Gold ever went back to their mom. But I will be the perfect son and try to see her as much as I can. And to prove that immediately, I'm going to get her some firewood so we don't get cold throughout the night. But a terrible thing happens. The moment I step out of that campsite, boulders start falling down and we are trapped on the other side while our mother has no idea we can't come back. So we go into a nearby cave to try and find some help. We end up running into a guy that tells me to jump into a minecart that should bring me back to the campsite. But something went wrong along the way. We took the wrong track and instead ended up into the Aqua Mines. And I'm starting to feel very anxious, alone as a kid in this mine. It makes me feel very vulnerable, but that's when we run into a Pokemon called Larvitar. It seems to be lost as well and would like to team up with me so we can get out of here together. So we take him with us and go through the rest of the cave, where we end up running into another Larvitar that flees off into a hole. And this is a very cool feature in Prism. You can shrink down into your own Pokemon and make them do these tiny little side quests. So we made him explore this little cavern until we found the Larvitar itself, who ended up telling me that he was just a little shy, that's why he ran off. He also gives me the soft sand, which will boost the power of our ground type moves. After this, we left the cave and turned back into our normal selves, who would find the exit of the cave, which ended up in Caper Ridge, a very cold and snowy town that doesn't have a large population, but we still went around and asked people for help with our mother, but they all pointed me into the same direction, the local Pokemon lab. So without any hesitation, I headed over there and met with the local Professor Ilk, who notices my Larvitar and immediately recognizes it as his own, but he managed to lose it somehow. However, he knows that it's very fond of me, so he decides to let me keep it. But in return, we need to go and check on his brother. He lives somewhere up north and isn't answering his phone, hence why he's worried. So I agree, and with my tiny legs, I head to Route 69. We get stopped by a guard when we get to the transition point, who didn't want to let us through at first because there's a punk up ahead causing trouble and he doesn't want us to get involved. But we tell him that we got sent here by Professor Ilk, and that's when he finally lets us through. A couple of minutes later, we reach the brother's house, who starts screaming that he needs help because somebody broke in and is trying to steal his Pokemon. We don't have much battle experience yet, but we definitely have the balls to take this guy on. Luckily for me, he didn't have any other Pokemon than the Bagon he just stole, and considering we're part rock type and he only had Rage as an attacking move, we easily won this with a couple of scratches. But we were too late. He manages to escape with the Bagon, but the professor's brother seems to not be too fazed about that. He's just happy that this guy is out of his house and just asks me for his name. As a responsible adult with a bad sense of humor, I name him Buttman and travel back to Professor Ilk to relay the good news to him. He's so happy, in fact, that he gives me a Pokédex and tells me to build a perfect team so we can keep up our father's legacy. With those wise words, I head to the Pokemart, spend all of my money on balls, and start capturing some frail Pokemon like Caterpie, who will eventually have a 4x weakness to rock, Paras, who can't stand a flying or fire type attack if it wanted to, and Geodude, who will either die to a puddle of water or a petal of grass. From there on out, I followed the road until I reached Clathrite Tunnel, where we found one of our best team members in this entire run, Sneasel. Yes, it might die to a single fighting type blow, but it's a fast glass cannon that can deal major points of damage. After this, we travel to our next destination, Oxalis City, where I found this underground dungeon that looks like an old Mario game, with stuff like ladders that let you climb up and down. Inside there were quite a lot of trainers for me to beat, which gave my Caterpie enough experience to turn into Butterfree. Oh, and we also ended up getting a free Cyndaquil that we of course can't use in battle. Now that our team is quite a bit stronger, we headed to the local gym, who was led by a fire type leader and filled with lava. Half of our team might be weak to fire, but the other half is really good against it. So without any hesitation, I challenged the leader, Josiah, and used my Geodude's Rock Throw to one-shot his Charmander. Then I swapped out into Larvitar and used Mud Slap 2 times in a row to take care of his Slugma, to end off one of the easiest gym battles yet and earn me the Pyre Badge. With it, we could move on through the rest of the route if this guy wasn't blocking off the road because he was tying up his shoes. And I waited for hours there. This man kept on tying his shoes over and over again. There was no way I was getting past him. So I hiked into Mount Cave instead, where our next encounter, Gligar, was waiting for me. He's 4 times weak to ice, so slots into the team perfectly. But little did I know there was trouble brewing up ahead, as Buttman seemed to be on a call with someone as he was following instructions. But the moment he spotted me, he turned off his phone and got ready for a brawl. He seems to be running with a 4 times weak team as well, starting out with a Paras that gets crushed by my Larvitar's Rock, then swapping into a Sneasel of his own, who takes a Rock Throw and takes me down with 2 Icy Winds. I then swap into my second Pokemon, Geodude, and crush it with even more rocks, and finally we gave him a taste of his own medicine by taking down his Bagon with my own Sneasel's Icy Winds. Once this battle's over, we ask him who he was calling with and what his plan is, but he doesn't want to tell anything. So now we're still left with tons of questions about this weird man. I try to follow him, but he seems to have blocked off the road with some rocks, and a miner nearby wanted to blow them up with some dynamite. But that got stolen by some colored freaks that were hanging around the bottom of this cave. So we better go and get that dynamite bag by fighting these weirdos. But this place is a total maze, definitely if you don't have an electric type on your team. You see, with one of those, you can turn on the lights inside of this place, so for a limited time, I added a Shinx to my team so I could light up this entire thing, otherwise I would be stuck here for hours. Don't worry, the little cat won't get used in battle. The hiker above us was definitely right, because all of these weirdos were wearing the same outfit but in different colors, kind of like the Power Rangers. But they also reminded me of the rainbow peon grunts in Gale of Darkness. No matter what they look like, they seem to be up to no good, so I had to step in and challenge them. The weird thing is that they also know my name, among a bunch of other things. Each and every one of them would also correspond with a team that would fit their colors, but taking them down was as easy as finishing off rocket grunts. And with each win, we'd get another stick of dynamite. Once all 5 sticks were acquired, I brought them back to the hiker, lighted them up with my Cyndaquil's flame, and boom, the rocks were cleared. This led out into Spurge City, one of the largest places in this entire game, with an orphanage where you can either donate your Pokemon or adopt them, but also a huge department store where they sold time machines. Which brings me to a pretty fun question. If you had a time machine yourself, would you go into the future or the past? I'd personally love to see what the dinosaurs looked like, so I'd probably use it to travel back in time. The local gym leader here was also gone, and the guy that was blocking the entrance had stiff legs from standing here for so long. So we had no other choice than to move to the next round, where we'd capture our newest encounter, Yanma, who is just like any other bug flying type, 4 times weak to rock. But with its speed boost ability, it would probably be more useful than Butterfree. A little further up, when we reached a checkpoint, another Power Ranger would try to stop us in our tracks. This time it was the red one. He heard that we had messed with his group back in the mines and doesn't want us to go any further. However, a quick battle later and he was already dealt with. It's clear these guys don't like me and want me to surrender to their group to make the world a better place. No idea why they want me to surrender or why they hate me, but I'm not gonna do any of that. Instead, I'm going to leave them in the dust by getting a free HM for Gut as a thank you from the local security guard for getting rid of that weirdo. And at the other side of this gate was Heath Village, a very small place that doesn't even have a Pokemon Center, but it does have its very own gym, which is being run in the local forest by the grass type specialist Renji. Turns out our bug and flying types are going to come in handy after all, so I challenged him by throwing out my Yanma against his Lombre. A few leech lives later and he was all drained out of life energy, but I didn't have a proper flying type move yet, so for Ivysaur I swapped back out into Butterfree. She ended up getting leech seeded and cut 3 times in a row, but still was left standing. This allowed her to blow the plant toad away with 4 gusts, and so Renji was forced to send out his final Pokemon, Tangela, which just like all the other plants in winter, died down to a little bit of ice from my Sneasel. Now that we have acquired the nature badge, cut trees are no longer a problem, which means we can use it to get to Laurel City, and that brought back some really bad flashbacks from the internet. I don't know if you guys remember, but there used to be a time where people were arguing over a voice that was either saying Laurel or Yanni. It was really stupid and I didn't really get it, but to be honest with you, I don't understand half the memes that come on my YouTube Shorts page anyway. But I do like this new one where everything just gets interrupted by a Spinosaurus edit. Anyway, enough of my bad memes. Let's see what Yanni City has to offer. There's a fossil lab here that I didn't really use since I never found a fossil. The Magikarp caverns are also located nearby, but that one is blocked off by a sage that doesn't let us enter unless we get the local gym badge. But the gym leader isn't around. She's searching for her lost Totodile, who wandered off into the forest, and because I'm a good Samaritan, I offered to bring that Totodile back so we could have our battle. And it was also a perfect opportunity to capture 2 new Pokemon. First up, Shroomish, who would be 4 times weak to flying once it evolved into Breloom, and Execute, who is 4 times weak to bug already. The rest of the forest was either blocked off by a sage or a Clefairy, but the Clefairy had one deal: we could send in one of our Pokemon to go further. So I used my Sneasel, and this part was full of little side quests, like bringing back a lost Caterpie to its mother Butterfree, helping out a Charmander crossing a river by delivering rocks to it, which was only possible after defeating a Wartortle on the beach, who would then give me access to a new rock. We then went into the Charmander's home and his parents were delighted to see me because we brought their little baby back. But another huge problem arose here. Turns out these Charizards were captured by evil scientists that were doing experiments on them and brainwashing them. and the only thing that would snap them out of it were Kuro shards. They also know the location of these scientists and decide to clear a path for me so we can head over there and stop them. This road ended up being blocked off by even more water puzzles and eventually a brainwashed Charizard that we snapped back to reality with some Kuro shards we already found, and once we continued down the road, we ended up finding the scientist's lab, who were surprised to see a Sneasel breaking in. One by one, we would slash down their teams until we eventually reached the end where Totodile was being held. After releasing it from its chains, we brought it back to its owner, the local gym leader, who invited me for a battle. So I traveled back to Laurel City, cut down a tree, and went into her building. She's once again really grateful for helping out her Pokemon, but Brooklyn here specializes in fairy types, which means her water type is not going to be used in our battle. Instead, she tries to intimidate me with her Jigglypuff. But that would never work, as we have the newly acquired power of status moves on our side. With Shrumish's Leech Seed and Poison Powder, we could continue to do chip damage while staying healthy with Mega Drain. This strategy totally shut down her Jigglypuff, Marill, and Wigglytuff as they were struggling against me, and embarrassingly all went down to an under-leveled flower. With the Charm Badge acquired, I tried to leave, but her Totodile ran out of the gym and decided to join my team. I get it, it's really grateful that I helped it out, but unfortunately I'm going to have to keep it in the box because this thing is not 4 times weak to anything. And I've got better things to do than to look after this Totodile, like going to the local Magikarp caverns to acquire all of the wisdom we need from the sages there. They are so obsessed with Magikarp, in fact, that if you even mention the word Gyarados, they will flip out. And I found out the hard way, because they turned me into a Magikarp after I said that. Then they made me swim throughout this insane water maze, which eventually led me to their leader, who realizes that we have a newfound respect for Magikarp, so he tells a sage in Yanni Forest to leave so we can get past him. In this new part, there were of course a ton of trainers for me to fight, which caused my Larvitar to evolve into Pupitar and Shroomish into Breloom. Not all that much happened along the way, so we immediately take a pit stop at Taurinia City, home of one of the most fun mini games ever, the Pachisi board. It works as a board game where you get a dice and a certain amount of throws. Each time you throw, you move up spaces on the board, and each tile has different effects. But the most important one for me was the Wild Battle tile. This one would make you encounter certain Pokemon which you could then either defeat or capture, and there were quite a few useful and rare ones I could add to the team. So I kept on playing until I got all of them. This included Scyther, who would be 4 times weak to Rock, and if it would evolve into Scizor, it would be Fire. Magikarp, who would have our only 4 times weakness to Electric. And lastly were Onix and Rhyhorn, who share the same weakness as my Geodude. Once I got everything from the board, I tried to move on through the next route, but got blocked off by a guard, who said that if we wanted to get past here, we needed more gym badges. So the only way for me to move forward was to go back to town and take the train to Botan City. But everywhere I asked around, there were rumors about an old mansion in the haunted forest that was making people fall asleep and having never-ending nightmares. That's what the next gym leader was also suffering from, hence why his gym was closed. He was asleep and could not wake up. So if you wanted to continue, we needed to find the source of this problem and take it down. So hesitantly, I went into this scary forest and found out that entering this mansion was harder than I thought. It was surrounded by graveyards and creepy bald dudes that kept on attacking me. But there was something very interesting about these graveyards. Each one of them had a colored tombstone, and when I pressed them, something would happen. Later, I found out that I needed to press them in the order of the rainbow, and once I did that, the mansion would open up for me. This time, the inside was filled not with creepy old men, but with creepy old women. And the weird thing was, one of the bedrooms ended up being locked. So I started searching around the mansion for keys and ended up finding 2 of them inside of crates. When I then used them to open up the door and enter, I ran into a Gengar who immediately put me to sleep and started feasting on my dreams. I then entered my own dream space where I found this weird rainbow pattern. After walking around, I found my mom disguised as a bird, but I also found myself, who told me to look deep within and see what was real and what wasn't. This then sent me to, I guess, my hometown, where we run into the Blue Power Ranger. He convinces me that I have the power to change the Naljo region and bring it back to its former glory, because it used to be a free country, but now it's fully corrupted by greed. This is very weird because it's a manifestation of my own thoughts, which means I must just think this myself. However, in the end, he tells me to just believe in myself because I can really be the hero. From that moment on, Gengar has finished eating my dreams and we wake up back in the mansion. He says this dream will probably feed him for weeks, so he's going to stop snooping off of other people now. And that's the sign for us to go back to the local gym leader to see if he has also woken up. That is indeed what happens, so we explain everything to the gym leader Edison, and for some reason, this guy straight up believes me. He's very grateful that we woke him up, however, he can't just hand me the gym badge, we still need to earn it with a battle, so let's get started. This man specializes in dark types, so he probably could have taken out that Gengar himself, but even though he's the 4th gym leader, most of his team is still not fully evolved, which makes it quite easy for me to take down his Houndour with my Gligar's wing attacks. His next Pokemon Sneasel then gets buried under my Pupitar's Rock-a-Lanche, and last up is his Ace Umbreon, the card that everybody wants to pack out of prismatic evolutions, but no one seems to be able to. Including me, I've never packed this thing before, so why don't I just use my Breloom to take out my anger and slash it in half with a Karate Chop. This wins us the battle and gets us our next badge, so I thought I could maybe move on to the next round, but the guy was still blocking the road. We need to get clearance from the professor because there was a really bad earthquake after this point. And just to save us some hassle, he decides to give me the HM for fly so we can get back and forth real quick. So I fly back to the lab and talk to the professor, who explains that there's been quite a lot of earthquakes across the region lately, and according to their research, these aren't natural phenomenons. We experienced this firsthand with the earthquake that separated me from my mom in the first place. And the only lead the professor has to this is an underground city filled with miners, which is somewhere south of Terrenial City, so he wants me to go there and investigate these artificial earthquakes. We have no choice but to agree because we need to save our mother somehow. After heading back there, the guard is gone, which means we can check out the rest of the route, which evolved my Magikarp into Gyarados, but also led me into the Milos catacombs. When I step inside, we get ambushed by Buttman. I don't know what he keeps on rambling about, but he basically says we're standing in his way and we need to put all of our big ambitions to rest because it's only hurting the citizens of the Naljo region. Yeah, not gonna happen, buddy. Let's destroy him in a Pokemon battle instead. He still has that stupid Parasect on his team, so we deal with it by hitting it with a wing attack from Gligar. His newest team member is Scyther, another Pokemon that's 4 times weak to something I have. So Pupitar nearly crushes it with Rock Tomb, but we ended up getting sliced up by a Fury Cutter. We did do enough damage for our own Scyther to use Quick Attack and finish it off though, but he still had Shelgon in the back, so I swapped out into my Gyarados, thinking I could hit it with a couple of Icy Winds and clear it off the field easily. But that's not what happened. He had a Thunder Fang in his arsenal, something I did not know about, which nearly took me out in one shot. So just when he was about to hit a second one, I swapped out into Gligar to cancel it out. A couple more wing attacks later, and he would be on to his last Pokemon Sneasel. I don't know what his plan was here, but he kept on hitting my Scyther with Screechers, which allowed me to hit 2 Bug Buzzes in a row, which took him down and made me the victor once again. Once the fight is over, he still doesn't want to tell anything about himself or what his true intentions are. He just asks me to leave him alone, which makes me think that he doesn't 100% stand behind his own morals. But we have no time to think about stuff like that. We need to save our mom, so I go through the cave, capture an Aron and Numel, who are weak to fighting and water, and a little further up, we run into 3 Power Rangers that are talking to some scientists. These 2 seem to be their bosses, and they're asking when they're getting paid. However, the scientists don't seem to think that they're doing their job very well, because they keep getting stopped by a 10-year-old kid. Plus, the police seem to be after them as well. However, the grunts tell them not to worry about the police at all. It's me that they should be worried about. A kid out of a random other country that seems to be sweeping through the region like it's nothing. The scientists calm them down by saying that they will take care of me because their big boss knows how to deal with these kinds of distractions. And they can't afford any more slip-ups because they're really close to finishing their big project. From there on out, they head further into the cave without spotting me, and we go after them. As we make our way throughout the cave, we of course battle each and every grunt over and over again, but in the end we defeat the yellow, blue, and pink one without much trouble. Plus, we also found the Razor Claw, which allowed my Sneasel to evolve into Weavile, a huge power upgrade. However, this place still had a couple of tricks up its sleeve, as they seemed to have laid down booby traps everywhere. And the only way for me to get get through it is by pushing and pulling the right handles, which would open up different paths to the next section of the cave. Along the way, we also found a pair of jumping shoes which allowed me to jump over gaps so we could make it to the end, where once we beat up the Green Ranger, we could move past him and find the way out, which was blocked off by a police officer. He's been guarding this area looking for a kid with spiky hair, which is obviously our rival Buttman, but he doesn't know that we're a kid with spiky hair and he starts to think we're him. So we prove to him in a battle that we didn't steal any of our Pokemon and only treat them with love and respect, which makes him realize that he has made a mistake. So he takes me down to the station where we might be able to help him out with this issue. He wants me to go undercover and find another criminal, and this is one we're familiar with also, one of the Power Rangers who's been spotted nearby. So he gives me one of their suits to wear, and with it we might be able to persuade the other guy that we're one of them and bring him back to the station somehow. I really like this part of the game, being in disguise, sort of like a super villain, and when I was battling trainers, my back sprite would be one of the Power Rangers. I just really enjoyed this moment quite a bit. Unfortunately, it was very short-lived, because on Route 85 we ran into the Black Ranger, who was apparently just taking a smoke break here. So we tell him that we found our boss and that he has to follow me now so we can bring him to him. Without any questions or hesitation, he agrees, and we bring him to the police officer, who locks him behind bars for a very long time. As a reward, the police officer lets me go with a warning for not having any identification with me. And since he knows we're on a champion journey, he also hands me the HM for strength, which you can only use after taking down the local gym leader. Turns out his gym is set up inside of a cave and he specializes in the fighting type, and we have more than enough bug flying types to deal with that. So I evolve my Yanma into Yanmega and challenge the leader, Andre. He led off with his Machoke, who got intimidated by my Gyarados. Then I swapped out into my Scyther, took a Seismic Toss and swiped it away with Air Slash. Gallade got dealt with by my Yanmega's Fly. His Lucario tried to set up with an Iron Defense, but we got lucky with a critical hit Karate Chop from Breloom to one-shot it. And last up was Machamp, who got flinched by my Butterfreeze, Air Slash, and with a second one, she came out of this fight unscathed. With a Muscle Badge in our hand, we have enough strength to break down boulders, so I used it to capture a Pineco, which would have a 4x fire weakness when it evolves into Fortress, so I better not bring him out in this next landmark, the Firelight Caverns, which is indeed filled with fire types. The only thing that was really interesting for now was capturing a Slugma, and only a couple of minutes later we would come out the other side in Provincial Park, which connected us to Route 80 and 81. On the former, there was an abandoned house with an Aggron inside. After reading its expression, it was clear that he was missing his trainer, so it urged to join my team and wanted me to head back to the Firelight Caverns, because that's where his trainer went missing. So back into the heat we go, and once we find this old man, he thanks me for bringing his Pokemon back to him. However, he still needs my help, because at the end of this tunnel lie the resting grounds of a powerful Naljo legendary, and now the scientists we met earlier are trying to awaken it, so they can try to bring Naljo back to its former glory. However, they don't know that the Guardian is so strong that it will probably kill everyone in the region who doesn't possess the bloodline of the first ever generation, which means so many innocent people and Pokemon will perish if we don't put a stop to them. After hearing this news, I don't hesitate and jump in like the hero I want to be, defeating the pink, blue, and red grunt along the way. The last one tells me that I'm just like my father, betraying your roots in search of popularity. But now this will be stopped once and for all, because the proud culture of Naljo will be returned any minute now. We then follow him further up in the cave, where we learn that the outfits that they're wearing aren't just for show, they're a traditional Naljo garb, which is needed if they want to gain the trust of the legendary Pokemon that resides here. But what if they're not from the original bloodline? They could all perish here too, and the rest of the colored grunts have either been arrested or have left the entire organization because they thought they were evil, and they just want to fight for a good cause. Once the Red Ranger starts explaining all of this, the other two start flaking out as well, saying that this might not be as good as an idea than they first thought. But the Red Ranger tells them to not betray them, otherwise they will feel his wrath. In that moment, they also spot me at the end of the room, so we come over to stand face to face with all three of them. Their leader then tells me that he plans to capture this legendary Pokemon so he can accomplish anything he wants. In that moment, he uses his orbs to awaken Varanus. He tries to explain to the beast that he needs his power to restore the region, but instead he gets attacked. It also attacks and breaks the Pink Ranger's leg before fleeing away. They just couldn't stand up to its power and never would have expected that this legendary would even attack them. But we did catch a glimpse of it ourselves, and when it sniffed us, it didn't attack us at all, which must mean we're also one of the original Bloodline people. Varanus also seems to have stolen some of the other orbs these guys had with them, and just when they're about to chase after it, the police roll up. They'll be putting these guys behind bars for a very long time, and they nearly mistake me as one of their members too. But the sage we helped out earlier vouches for me by saying that this red one is the one behind everything, and I just tried to stop them. In this moment, I also tell everything what happened, and they don't really understand why the beast didn't attack me. But then the sage says that I have a very big resemblance to the Dragon Master Lance, champion of the region. So I tell him that that's my father. Shocked, he brings me back to his house and starts telling me a tale. He says that we're in a really bad spot, and my father Lance is the reincarnation of the messenger. We have no idea who that is, so he starts at the very beginning. You see, thousands of years ago, Naljo was an isolated region, which was the wish of the Guardians. They created Naljo so that the people that lived in it would be free of the troubles brewing outside of Naljo, and each Guardian was apparently assigned an island so that they could rule over it. And the rule was that the rest of the world would never interfere with the Naljo natives, so that nobody would be fighting over differences and everybody would work together to solve their problems. The names of these four Guardians were Varanus, Raiwado, Libabil, and Faumbako. Each of these Guardians had their own orb, which contained the very source of their powers. Each of these Pokemon would control a different element, like nature, the sea, or lava. Varanus, the one we just ran into, controls the last one. And back when he was still roaming the earth, everybody who would come to Naljo from the outside would be burned by his hateful stare, and then either perishing or returning to their hometown with charred scars. This is what kept Naljo so isolated throughout the years. But there was one person that could communicate, the messenger. He would relay messages from the Guardians to the community and was the only human that these legends trusted. But they never told the messenger that they were slaying anything that was trying to get in. When he discovered this after many years, however, he decided to steal all orbs and strip them from their power, and then hit them all across the region. And so they fell asleep for decades, but once an orb gets close enough, they wake up again, and everything could start anew. Which means only me or my father could save the region. However, my father doesn't really know how much power he has over Naljo and is only worried about his fame and fortune nowadays. So I'll be the only one left to avoid this chaos. And if we want to know more about the location of Varanus, we need to head north to a lighthouse where they might have spotted him. But there was a tiny problem. The bridge that was normally leading over there is destroyed, and we need someone to rebuild it since we don't have access to surf yet. So I head to his shop, buy 20 bricks, and bring them to a karate man. Then I dared him that he couldn't build a bridge in less than a day, and then he went to work. 20 minutes later, the bridge was built and we could head over there. On the other side was the Asiana dock, and so I wasted no time, went straight to the lighthouse and got my HM for surf, which is the only way to reach Varanus if we'd ever want to put a stop to him. But if you want to utilize it, we need to earn our new gym badge. So I started evolving some of the Pokemon I hadn't used before, like Numel into Camerupt, Aron into Laron, Pineco into Fortress, and finally Pupitar into the mighty Tyranitar. With these changes, we confronted the local gym leader who has one of the two new types that Prism has implemented, Gas. The other one is Sound. The Gas type is super effective against Fighting, Fire, and Fairy, and is not very effective against Rock, Sound, Grass, and Ice. On top of this, it resists Fighting, Fairy, and Ground, and is weak to Fire, Grass, and Electric. The Sound typing, on the other hand, is super effective against Ghost, Steel, and Water, not very effective against Fighting and Bug, plus it resists Rock, Steel, Gas, and Water, and is weak to Fighting, Bug, and Electric. Now that you know what these two new types are all about, let's see if we can beat Ayaka's full-on Gas type team without any prior knowledge. She starts out with her Haunter, who for some reason knows Double Kick and uses it against my Rhyhorn. but its hard exterior makes it basically immune. We then get a lucky critical hit with Rock Slide and managed to one-shot it. Next on out was her Drapion, so I swapped the camera up and hit it with an Earthquake. Little did I know that he was also going to have an Earthquake of his own. So expecting another one, I swapped out into Gligar, but instead he healed up his Pokemon. I would then use Earth Power 2 times in a row to take it down, while tanking 2 Night Slashes in the process. His next Pokemon, Torkoal, also couldn't stand up to my Tyranitar's Rock Throws, which only left him with a toxic gas wheezing. It kept on using this new move called Burning Mist, which my Lairon could easily tank 3 hits of. From there on out, we would have to hit 2 Iron Tails and a Rock Slide, and that's the Haze badge acquired. My Godzilla then learned how to surf on water, but normally he just walks out of the sea, so I don't really know how that happens. This made us reach the Naljo Ruins, a very interesting place, filled with booby traps and a new Pokemon for us to capture, this time Cacnea, who would turn into Cacturne, and then he would gain a 4 times weakness to Bug-type moves. Then onto the booby traps. They consist of poison arrows that are shot at you, but also total pitfalls that make you fall to the floor below. This made it quite hard to navigate the entire place, and on top of this, the yellow and green grunts also seem to be stationed here. They have decided to work together so that they can try to make a ton of money. And the way they're trying to do it now is by collecting the jewels that are spread across this entire labyrinth. And once you acquire all 4 of them, you'll be able to open the chest with treasure at the end. But once I beat both of them in a battle, I acquired all 4 jewels myself, opened it up, and boom, a Prism jewel was inside. I know, a big name drop right there, since this game is also called Pokemon Prism, but it doesn't really have a lot of significance right now. The only thing we can do with it is hand it to a random explorer, who will then give you a fake ID card in return. With this fake ID card, you can get past the guard and onto Route 79. The moment you start running along these docks, a police officer comes up to you and says that I'm illegal in this country because this fake ID won't work on him. Last time we might have gotten off with a warning, but this time we're actually being sent to jail. Not a very good jail, mind you. There is a ton of holes everywhere and even an escape tunnel. So I followed that one outside, but unfortunately my path here is also blocked off by a strength boulder, so we can't really proceed. Instead, we got one of the Power Rangers that got locked up by the police, and he says that the red Power Ranger somehow managed to escape, which is terrible news. But from this point onward, he has decided to change his life, not working with the team anymore, and as his first good deed, he decides to give me a cell key, which he found in the warden's house. We can use these keys to open up other prisoners' doors so that we can get potential information on how we need to get out of here. Most of them will just attack you though, which means we'll probably need a couple more of these keys because every time you use them, they'll break. So I started searching around the jail and found a couple of keys. We then used it to open up the cell door of the Black Grunt, which we ended up locking in here ourselves with our undercover mission, and just like the blue one outside, he has also decided to change his life. And gives me a hint that we should head to the roof because we need the basement key code. And the guards on top of the building might have the answer as to where to get it. So with our new card, we get access to the roof, beat up the 2 guards there, and they tell us that if we want the passcode for the basement, we need to head over to the cafeteria. There should be a guard there that knows the passcode, and once we start bribing him, we learn that the combination is Wiggly Jelly. Quite the weird password for a prison, but I'm not going to judge. I'm just going to head to that basement where all the evil Pokemon are locked up. But those weren't the only ones in here. Our rival Butthead also somehow ended up in prison. The only reason he got arrested was due to his stealing and harsh training methods. And even all of that hadn't changed his mind. He still thinks this world is full of weaklings and these walls can't hold a strong man like him back. That's why he's looking for a way out. But battling me is a nice change of pace for him. So let's show him once again that using a Parasect is the most useless thing you can do. Like last time, it gets one-shotted by a wing attack from my Gligar. He then brings out a new Pokemon, Ursaring, who gets karate chopped twice by my Mushroom Chicken, so he has no choice but to send out Scizor. We don't have a fire type with us, so Gyarados is our next best bet. By using Intimidate, its attack is already crippled, and with 3 more waterfalls and a flinch after that, the red pinching bug is out and the slashing Weavile comes in. I send Breloom back out and click Karate Chop, fully thinking that it was going to kill me with an Ice-type move, but it clicked Agility, which allowed me to get a free KO once again. I then tried to deal with his Shelgon by sending out a Weavile of my own, but 2 Icy Winds didn't end up being enough because it's a special move, and for some reason Weavile basically doesn't learn any physical Ice-type moves until this point. So once we get finished off by a second Dragon Claw, I'm forced to bring in Gyarados again and click Icy Wind once more, and because we managed to defeat him, he rewards me with the HM for strength, which we can use to get out of here. Now we can freely explore the rest of the island without having to worry about the police, so I started running into the new patches of grass we unlocked, which gave me a Vibrava as my new team member. We immediately evolved into Flygon and got Cacturn, Magikarp, and Rhydon on top of this too. Once that was done, I headed to the local gym, which also turned out to be a recording studio since the lead singer here is also the gym leader. Her name is Cadence and she specializes in the new sound typing. And while I love concerts and festivals myself, I'm not going to let her rock me. To my luck, Miss Magius is now also a sound typing, which means my Weavile can one-shot it with just a single bite. Wigglytuff comes out next, so I swap out into Magikarp and use 2 flamethrowers to bring it down into red health, but it outspeeds me and also brings me down into red health with voice pulses. I don't want my Lava Slug to go down here, so I swap out into Flygon and then use Earth Power to deal with it and an incoming Pokemon Magnezone as well. Last out is the ultimate sound Pokemon Exploud, who could shout so hard that it would burst your eardrums. I tried to overpower it with my Cacturn's Dark Pulses, but that didn't end up working, because one of his Noise Pulses managed to confuse me, and once I hit myself in my own confusion, Cacturn was down for the count, which made me swap in Rhydon and finish off this fight with one last Earthquake. Now that the Raucous badge was ours, we could leave and enter a nearby ice cave, which was of course filled with ice puzzles for me to complete. But with my Galaxy Brain, I completed those in less than 5 minutes, and slid right into Flockstown. There's not much to do on this isolated island except for checking out an abandoned lab. At least that's what I think, since the front door is totally locked. So instead, I decide to check out the basement, which was accessible through a cave, and only guarded by a single shiny Rhydon that I ended up capturing. Once inside, I found all the spin tiles that Team Rocket loved to use, which already gave me a bad feeling about this place. There was also only one person around here, and that was a guard that was supposed to guard the entrance. He tried to shoo me away with a Pokemon battle, but once he got fully destroyed, he just handed me the lab card because he couldn't defend himself anymore. With it, we could go through the front entrance to see what this entire thing was about. Inside, there was a lot of angry employees waiting for me, as well as even more puzzles, only now with different colored teleport tiles that had to be turned on and off in order to find the right way through this place. Deeper inside the lab, we also ran into the yellow and green grunts, who seemed to be working together with whoever the boss here was. To this day, they still hate me and their former leader Red, and their only goal right now is to be financially stable. But they still do it in unethical ways by working with this illegal research lab. So we take both of them down just like we did every other time. We then get to help 6 Pokemon that were locked up here, and as a reward, they decided to help us out in return by clearing the way to the top floor. That's where we met the evil scientist mastermind behind this entire organization here. He starts to say that a little kid like me could never understand what's going on here, because he's in the business of cloning Pokemon, and was even behind the creation of the Mewtwo incident. Once that entire catastrophe happened, cloning was forbidden and his entire life's work was stripped away from him. And since then, he has devoted his life to a medical company that aims to advance Pokemon through full genetic augmentation. And he isn't going to let a kid like me foil his plans. So now he's going to use his genetically altered Pokemon in a battle against me to show me that they are in fact superior. Starting out with a Weezing that immediately poisons my Rhydon with a Sludge Bomb. From that point onward, he just starts spamming haste, so we just need to hit 3 Rock Slides to bury it. His nasty plot spamming Slowking got killed by 2 of my Signal Beams from Yanmega. 1 Earth Power from Flygon got his Magnetons ripped apart. My Weavile just learned a couple of nice moves like Swords Dance and Ice Punch, so I used those to take down his Porygon Z while surviving a Void Pulse, and his last team member was Magnezone, who would yet again die to my Flygon's Earth Power. To this day, I haven't seen a genetically altered Pokemon on his team at all, and even if they were still weak as ever, proving once again that treating your Pokemon with love and good training is the only thing you need to succeed. Once this knowledge had been passed on, the police officers that helped us out last time with Palette Red came in and thanked me for all of our help once again. Since we took this entire place down, they can bring all the stolen Pokemon back to their trainers, and everybody that worked here is going behind bars or is going to be paying heavy fines, which eliminates one of the biggest threats this region has seen. The police commander also mentions that he is the final gym leader and can now go back to doing what he loves, which is running the gym. So he takes my hand and brings me back to Spurge City, where we can have our very last gym battle. But he isn't just going to let me challenge him. First, he drops me into a hole and steals all of my Pokemon. Then I have to try to escape this dungeon and find all my Pokemon back while defeating some pretty important battles. So first things first, removing a boulder color with the push of a button. This unlocked a piece of dynamite which I used to blow up some rocks. This then led me to a dungeon where I had to do a flip switch puzzle, opening and closing walls. With that, I was able to find 2 of my Pokemon. Luckily, one of them was Rhydon, which was important for this next battle, where we face previous gym leaders that we've already beaten. All of them have the same team you fought before, but now fully evolved, starting with Josiah and his fire types, which all got destroyed by rock slides from Rhydon. After this, we found more of our Pokemon in the open, which we used to defeat Cadence, the gym leader we just beat. From here on out, all of the puzzles were done and we just had to defeat the grass-type gym leader Ringy, plus the dark-type user Edison. Once we conquered both of those, we entered the final room where Bruce, the steel-type gym leader, was waiting for our final battle. He was surprised to see that we could complete his challenge and really wanted to see what our battle style was like. So I didn't waste much time and started off with my Rhydon against his Mawile. He also boosted my attack with a Swagger, which allowed me to take on the next Pokemon Aggron with a single Earthquake as well. From there on out, we got one-shotted by his Magneton's Flash Cannon, so I decided to bring out Flygon and use 2 Earth Powers in a row to flatten it. If it didn't have Sturdy, we wouldn't have gotten hit by that hidden power, but that probably didn't matter too much since his Metagross knew Ice Punch, which definitely would have one-shotted me anyway. One of our Earth Powers did do enough damage for our Weavile to bite it to death. This only left him with Magnezone. I swapped into Breloom and hit the Mag Punch Leech Seed combo before dying to yet another Flash Cannon, and just like with Metagross, my Weavile just loves eating steel too much, so once its fangs got sunk into it, which is how we earned the Naljo badge. And now there was only one more thing left in our path to conquer before we could reach Indigo Plateau, the infamous Victory Road. Filled with dangerous waters, strength puzzles, but most importantly, a legendary bird called Articuno that's 4 times weak to rock-type moves. So at this point, I had already figured this was going to be my ace in the hole. With much effort, we were able to bring it down into red health, and after lobbing a couple of Ultra Balls at it, its icy power was placed in my hands. After this, the rest of Victory Road was a piece of cake, but we couldn't challenge the league just yet, because on the horizon, a red spiky-haired boy appeared for one last battle. Buttman here has escaped prison and has now roamed around the region as a fugitive, which made him look at the world differently and changed his entire perspective. Because now that he can't talk to other people, he has really thanked his Pokemon for their presence. His bond with them has grown ever stronger, and now he wants to test that newly found bond in a battle with me. So let's see if Buttman has really changed his ways. In terms of strategy, I absolutely wouldn't say so, as Tyranitar can still one-shot his Parasect with a single Dust Devil. Next on out is his Scizor, who slashed up my Tyranitar as well as Breloom, which only left me with Weavile since all of my other Pokemon were dead from the Victory Road trip. The only way I was gonna win was by setting up, so we took down his Scizor with a Night Slash and set up a Swords Dance on his Ursaring, which then allowed me to knock it out with 2 more Ice Punches. His Shelgon had finally turned into a mighty Salamence, so unlucky for him, my Ice type was the only thing left. So we froze it in place with yet another Ice Punch, and now it was a mirror match, my Weavile against his. Its defense is rather frail, so all we need is 2 more strings to end off the battle. This makes Buttman realize how much harm he's really done to other people and his Pokemon, but thanks to me, he knows how to change his ways and set an example for here on out. He knows that my style of battling really brings out the best in Pokemon, and he even goes on to give his very first compliment by saying that a trainer like me should really be a champion. With those beautiful words, we split up for the rest of our journey, because now it's time for us to take on the Elite Four. So after building my ultimate team, we stepped into yet another ice puzzle to face the first specialist, Yuki. If you didn't see it by the room already, she does indeed have a full-on ice-type team, which made my Breloom quite happy as it immediately took down her first team member, Mamoswine, with a Sleep Powder Seed Bomb combo. From there on out, I just had to swap in Tyranitar and use Crunch on her Frostlass, and then clicked Rock Slide 3 times in a row, which shattered Weavile, Glalie, and Glaceon like they were nothing. I then walked into the next room to face Flying Master Sora. He would lead off with his Gyarados, which I tried to put to sleep with Breloom, but he immediately woke up once I swapped in my Weavile. Because of this, he was able to set up 2 Dragon Dances and one-shotted me as well with a Waterfall. I could potentially get sweeped here if I don't play my cards right. So I sent out Articuno and tanked a waterfall, proceeding to use 2 ancient powers, which would bring down the big Leviathan. I then tried to freeze his blimp, but that didn't work out as it survived with like 1 HP and used Thunderbolt to bring down my Icy God. Flygon then finished it off with 2 Bug Buzzes and also took down the incoming Altaria with an Outrage. After this, I swapped out into Tyranitar to deal with Pidgeot by using Rock Slide. His Gliscor got down by a single waterfall from Gyarados. 2 members down, which means 2 more to go before we can face our dad. The second to last opponent was Daichi, the ground-type user. Ground types tend to have a lot of weaknesses, including ice, so this should not be a problem. First, we start off by taking down his Rhydon with a Seed Bomb from Breloom. I then brought out Flygon to use Earthquake on his Steelix twice and bring down the Titan. The mirror match of Flygon versus Flygon also turned out in my favor with an Outrage killing the opponent. Articuno then used its Ice Beam and Aerial Ace to clean up Donphan, and with 2 more waterfalls, his Rhyperior would also fall. Onto the last room, where we face Mura, somebody that doesn't really specialize in anything and doesn't really face a lot of challengers either way, because they all get beaten by the previous members anyway. So he gets riled up for our battle and is ready to fight with passion. Starting off with his Fearow, who is able to get a Sky Attack off on my Articuno due to me having to swap out Breloom. If it wasn't a critical hit, we might have survived, but that wasn't the case and Articuno is now down for the count. So I swapped in Weavile and used Swordsdance to one-shot the Flying Bird. His Houndoom also somehow died to a single strength, but for his Tyranitar, I had to swap out back into Breloom. I then rendered it useless with a Sleep Powder and proceeded to hit 2 more Mag Punches to bring down Godzilla. Weezing was up next, so I sent out Gyarados, clicked Dragon Dance 3 times, and took it down with 2 waterfalls. Ludicolo then got finished off by a single Outrage, but Leafeon, his final Pokemon, managed to survive somehow. I ended up being confused on this turn, and it was charging up a Solar Beam, so I ended up swapping out into Weavile to tank it and hit 2 more Ice Punches while he healed up, which is how we defeated the final Elite Four member. Now all the tension comes running down my body as I walk into this final room. Every step I take is heavier and heavier as I look my father in the eyes. He heard about the cave-in with Mom and has missed me ever since. He even rushed out to clear all the underground pathways to search for us, but never found us. Eventually, he stumbled on Professor Ilk, who told him that we'd been studying Pokemon and going on our own journey. This made his heart swell up with pride, and so he stopped the search for me and waited right here because he knew that I would be strong enough to face him one day. And now that that day has finally come, we can have our father-son battle that will be described in the history books for ages to come. So let's show our dad that pride and fame isn't the only thing a champion is all about. We've known our dad for our entire life, and this gives us an advantage over him. We know he only uses dragon types, or at least Pokemon that look like dragons, so I decided to start off with my Weavile against his Salamence, which gave me the upper hand as I only needed 1 Ice Punch to clear it off the field. Charizard came out next, yet another Pokemon we had the perfect counter for. Tyranitar used 1 Rock Slide, and it was already done and over with. His dragon types hadn't dried up yet, as he sends out Garchomp next, which is when I sent out my Articuno, which surprised him very heavily. He had no idea his son had a legendary Pokemon by his side. He knew that he was bound to be defeated when I Ice Beamed his Landshark into oblivion. His Flygon then managed to outspeed me and do decent damage with Outrage, but it wasn't enough. Another Ice Beam, another kill. The turn after, all of his dragon types finally combined their power, with Altaria finishing off my Articuno with Dragon Breath. But the other 5 Pokemon on my team were still standing, so I once again used Weavile to clear this Cloud Bird and send it back into the skies. This left him with only Gyarados, and I knew I had to finish this battle with the Pokemon that started it all, Tyranitar. They ate up its Outrages like it was nothing, then used its signature move Rock Slide to bury it yet again, and as the stones were falling down and the rubble cleared up, my dad was standing there with open arms, proud as can be, and so happy that he got defeated by his one and only son. I then told him there was one thing I wanted to do before being crowned as champion, and that was reunite him back with Mom so we could be a family once again. And once we tell our entire beautiful story to our moms, she's so proud we turned out like our dad. And once the entire Guardian situation is cleared up, Dad promises to be home way more often to spend time with the the both of us. But that guardian problem is something he's going to have to solve for himself, because I'll be staying with Mom for the time being. However, I do still let him crown me as champion into the Hall of Fame. And that's how we became the strongest trainer Pokemon Prism had ever seen. As always, before I end off this video, I want to thank my membership and Patreon supporters for supporting the channel. It really helps me out a ton. And if you'd be interested in helping out yourself, the link is always in the description. Every single Pokemon in every single video is going to be named after them, and you get shoutouts like these at the end of every video too. With all of that out of the way, I've been Zwiggo, and I'll see you guys in the next one.